Feel free to take a seat in the corner and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you. Ah, Mr. Descartes, table for one.
Oui, monsieur, c'est juste moi aujourd'hui.
No, Mrs. Descartes tonight.
We don't talk about Helena. She was just a serving bench.
And your daughter?
Daughter's a bastard.
Oh, okay. Well, would you like to see the wine list?
I think not.
Why did I let him script that? It is a common conclusion about the old philosophers that they are just all a bunch of old white dudes with beards in togas talking about how to be a good man. And speaking of an old dude with a beard, over to Dane to tell us about some old philosophers.
You calling a dude? I'm not a dude.
No,
you're a
am I?
dude. Oh, she's not a dude. Dude looks like a lady.
So tell us how it all began.
Zeno the Prophet. So Zeno, he was an old Roman dude. His family specialised in trading purple dye, very expensive commodity. It was made from crushed sea snails. So because of that, purple was associated with royalty. Only the rich could afford to wear purple, which is why we're in white. And he was heading off to Athens by boat, and he lost his cargo. And I quote here, he said, "Well done, fortune, thus to drive me to philosophy." And he's very much the OG, if you like, of the Stoicism movement. So he was in Athens, he was walking around, and he passed a bookshop and he heard someone talking. And so he goes into this bookshop and he says, where can I find a great philosopher like this Socrates dude? And as he asked that, a guy called Crates happened to be walking past, and Crates was a philosopher. So the bookshop staff sort of went, "That's your guy, him over there, go and chat to him." So he did. So Zeno, he was known for living frugally and not losing his temper, and there was a saying which was, "He is more temperate than Zeno the philosopher." And he was the first guy to set out the 4 virtues. I wonder if, Suzie, do you know what the 4 virtues are?
Courage, justice, temperance, and something else.
It's courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom, so I can understand why you missed that last one. I think one of the most interesting things about the historic philosophers anyway is the way that they died, because they all lived weird lives and had weirder deaths. Zeno is a great example of the weird death. So he was walking along one day, he was 72, he fell down, broke his finger, right? And then he quoted the great poet Timotheus, "I come of my own accord, why then call me?" And then he just sort of...
He held his breath until he died. The way he died shows that he did a daily practice of Memento Mori, which is where the Stoics would prepare themselves for their inevitable death and everything else that could lead up to that. Especially appropriate now, because in times like these, people are in a perfect position to come face to face with the concept of Memento Mori more than ever. Because in these times of pandemic, not only is death everywhere, but also you really feel it now. And most people don't like that. They want to avoid the idea that you're going to die one day. In a perfect world, babies are made and no one ever dies, but that is simply not how it happens. So Memento Mori, much like negative pre-visualization, don't become an anxious wreck or a depressed nihilist, but you become a prepared realist, because you have foreseen the potential bad thing, you've then got over yourself, and you've prepared a virtuous response to it. And that is the goal of Memento Mori, to not be faced by anything, including when anyone dies, including yourself. Oh, I do think that Zeno's story is a little bit dramatised, but it does show the point perfectly.
Do you wait until we get to some of the later stories?
I can't wait.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Clean these.
Clean these who?
Clean these nuts! We're about to talk about Clean These, although his name's actually Cleanthes, but it doesn't, that skit doesn't really work with Cleanthes. So Cleanthes moved to Athens and took on a bunch of different odd jobs, including one job as a water boy, which earned him the nickname Phreantles, which means water boy, but obviously it's also a pun on Cleanthes. It's very much as if they'd called him Clean These Nuts, basically. It's the ancient Greek equivalent. Cleanthes is super important because he was one of Zeno's first major pupils. He spent 19 years of his life basically taking down Zeno's teachings, and he was the first to sort of turn it into I guess a single, almost like a set of rules that people could follow. Bloody boy racers. One of the sad things about Cleanthes is he wrote a lot of works that are now considered lost. We know that they exist through references to them, but we don't know what they contained. And I really like his belief towards poetry. He said that poetry is like a trumpet that, you know, focuses our breath into sound. So he said that poetry was the equivalent of a trumpet, which I think's... Blow me trumpet, love.
No.
Me Donald trumpet. Cleanthes had a belief. He thought that suffering, as long as it was in the pursuit of good, was a virtue as opposed to like an evil. He also delivered a devastating put down to one of his students. So he was teaching them a lesson and he said, "Do you see?
Yes, I see.
Then why do I not see that you see?" And then he was like...
Accurate.
We're all about accuracy on this channel.
Oh yeah. This reminds me of how when something bad does happen, it has to be perceived as an opportunity to practice the virtues instead of it being just a bad thing. And I have a perfect example. On my way to my parents just before the most recent lockdown, I was so nervous about catching the train on time because I was going from Buckinghamshire to Devon and that was about to not be good at all. And the bus that was going to get me to the train station was running so late that the only way I could catch the train in time was if I got off the bus and then walked straight across town at a power walk, and that was fear, and that's a passion according to the Stoics. And then I was power walking across town and I tripped over something and I just went bash and I ripped my knee open and it was blood everywhere and I was like, ah, God, and all of the words that you can't say on YouTube. And that gave me anger and pain, which are passions. And then some guy, he just walked straight past me while I'm bleeding on the sidewalk, and I had the impression that he was really rude and it made me angry. So I had fear, I had pain, I had anger, and if I had given in to these passions, I would have rage quit, missed my train and not seen my parents this year. But instead it was an opportunity to practice the virtues, which was temperance, choosing to get off the bus and choose to walk. I was also carrying some really heavy bags, which was probably part of why I carked it onto the pavement, and that was strength and courage to push through. I then had to do the whole "it seemed right to him" thing when he walked past, because maybe he was embarrassed and didn't want to help me, maybe he was running late, so it seemed right to him. By pushing through all of the passions, by exercising the virtues, I got a reward for being a good Stoic, and I did get to see my parents this year, and they're watching this now.
Hi, mum-in-law. So we're going to talk about Aristo the Challenger. Not Aristotle, just Aristo, just like the first half of his name. So Aristo didn't like the idea of precepts, which is the idea of having some rules that you live your life by. He actually called it advice from old women because he was a sexist prick. Although he did make a good point, I think. He said, one who has trained himself for life as a whole does not need to be advised on specifics. There is a Stoic rule, which is that you should listen twice as much as you talk, because you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. This guy, Aristo, he challenged that. That's partly why he's called Aristo the Challenger. He challenged everything, to be honest. He came along and was like, I like what you guys are doing, but I think we should do it this way. And that caused a little bit of trouble, as you can imagine.
Sounds a bit like you.
Yeah. You know what else sounds a bit like me? When Zeno got annoyed with him, bear in mind this is Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. He didn't get that annoyed with people. And he went over to Aristo and he pointed at him and he goes, "You're a babbler, and I suspect your father was drunk when he sired you." That's some ancient Greek, what would you call it, salt? Not salt.
Yeah. All of the salt.
A little bit of salt. One of the things that Aristo challenged was this idea that there are things that are nice to have, like health and wealth. He said basically you're either virtuous or you're not, and the state of your wealth or your health or your bank balance doesn't really come into play. So we have a little bit of a dialogue here between Chrysippus and Aristo. So if you wouldn't mind playing Chrysippus.
I'm going to pretend I know the words. There's totally not a screen down here. Okay, right. We might ask, how could we live a life if it didn't matter to us whether we were well or sick, at ease or racked with pain, whether we could keep off cold or hunger or not?
You'll live splendidly, wonderfully. You'll act as seems right to you. You'll never sorrow, never desire, never fear. You got fluff in your beard.
That dialogue reminds me of the Stoic concept of what is good and what is bad. And what is bad is typically the passions, distress, fear, lust and delight. Weird that should seem like a bad thing, but there it is. It's something that affects you into doing something that's not rational, right? And the things that are good are the virtues. So you've got your passions that are bad, and then you've got your virtues that are good. And the virtues are wisdom, justice, courage and temperance.
You remembered it that time.
I totally didn't look at the screen. In terms of what is good or bad, boils down to what can you actually control. And the truth is, the only thing you can actually control are your own thoughts and actions. Everything else is something else. And as a result, it has to be indifferent because you can't control it, and therefore it can't be good or bad. It just is what it is. So you can say, it's indifferent to me. What you're feeling is an impression. So when you feel anger or offense at something, that is an impression, not the thing it actually is. Philosophy and psychology start to overlap quite a lot when you get to this point, because it's very similar to cognitive behavioural therapy, where they treat the human brain like a computer. So if you change the thoughts, you will also affect the feelings. So if you can say, I am not angry about this because I don't have to get angry about it, actually it's indifferent to me, you are going to feel better because you've short-circuited yourself. One of the ways that the Stoics work on this is by doing the affirmations. So that is where you would say things like, it is indifferent to me, or it seemed right to them, or Memento Mori, or amor fati. It's not the thing that annoys you, but your impressions about it. So when people argue over an opinion or a principle, you're arguing over opinions which are actually not things. You're arguing over nothing. So you can think about that the next time you're up against a troll on the internet. You're arguing over actual nothing. So why bother caring about it? We all know that one. It seems right to them, and they will die one day too.
See you guys in the comments. I just get in the framing right. What do you know about running?
Not much. I'm more of a jogger.
You jog? I walk. So this guy we're about to talk about, Chrysippus the fighter, as well as being a fighter, he was a keen runner. And he said, runners in a race ought to compete and strive as hard as they can, but by no means should they trip their competitors or give them a shove. And he argued, so too in life. He was so confident that he told our old friend Clean These Nuts, Cleanthes, he told him he only needed to know a person's doctrines and he could discover the proofs or refutations of those doctrines for himself. There was a saying as well that if the gods were to take up the art and science of arguing, then they would use Chrysippus as their role model. This is another guy who had an awesome death, as deaths go. He was sitting there in his porch, just chilling, you know, just like, nice day today. And this donkey came up, and this donkey started eating his figs. And he looked at the donkey, and he just, right, well, what are you doing?
There's a cat.
So he was watching this donkey, and he just started absolutely falling about laughing, pointing at this donkey, and he goes, give the ass some wine to wash down the figs. And he died.
So did he like laugh himself to death or something?
I guess.
That's right up there with the deaths, yeah. So, just like I said when I was on that side of the screen, yes, that is one heck of a death by Stoic standards. And it does remind me how we are all supposed to interact with our fellow humans, and how to not be overly affected by the actions of other people because it seems right to them. It sounds to me like the ass in the story, or the donkey, depending on where you're from, it could be a metaphor for an idiot who's doing something that could be perceived as really offensive. I mean, he's eating his figs, didn't pay for them, did he? What an ass. The way that your philosopher is laughing and joking about it shows the acceptance of the way other people behave. And the way he laughs himself to death about it is that utter joyfulness that comes from the true acceptance of everyone else, because all we are ever doing is the best we can with what we currently have available to us. It makes things like forgiveness a lot easier to do when you can view things this way. In a way it is a really good death, but it is a shame that it killed him. What's our next one?
Portia Cato, the Iron Woman. Women were often overlooked. Where have we heard that one before?
All of history.
It's funny you should say that, because I have a quote here. This is from The Rise of the American Empire in the days of the old American Wild West. And this is Robert Caro, not Cato, Robert Caro. And he said, you hear a lot about gunfights in westerns. You don't hear so much about hauling up water from the well after a perennial tear.
Ow! Oh!
Yeah, no, but
Let's not.
So she was the daughter of Cato, not Robert Caro, and she was married to Brutus. And when she discovered that Brutus was plotting to kill Julius Caesar with the famous "Et tu, Brute," when she discovered it, she wanted to prove her loyalty to him. So what she did was she stabbed herself in the leg and then just sat down to see how long she could stand the pain. When Brutus got home, she grabbed him and said, and I quote, "Brutus, I am Caro's daughter, and I was brought into thy house not like a mere concubine, to share thy bed and board merely, but to be a partner in thy joys and a partner in thy troubles. Thou indeed art faultless as a husband, but how can I show thee any grateful service if I am to share neither thy secret suffering nor the anxiety which craves a loyal confidant? I know that woman's nature is thought too weak to endure a secret, but good rearing and excellent companionship go far towards strengthening the character, and it is my happy lot to be both the daughter of Cato, not Robert Caro, and the wife of Brutus. Before this, I put less confidence in these advantages, but now I know that I am superior to even pain."
Wow. This thing about Brutus perfectly portrays women were never really allowed in the picture. How many guys have you talked about, and then we've got one woman? That's because back in the day, women weren't really allowed in the temple. They were down there with the slaves. The Stoics in the original versions, they talk about citizens and they assume men. So, but things are not that way now. I know it's so hard for you, you straight white man. But we are now reaching the point in the video where we can start including more different types of people. So how about we do a TikTok jump into the modern day, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, 3, 2, And as you can see, things have both changed and stayed the same. We have gone from old men with beards in libraries arguing about how to be good men, to people on social media arguing over Wi-Fi across the planet about how to be good people. And the conversation continues.
Let's conversate. So I'm just gonna make sure I'm on that. No, it's a book. Stoic number 6 is Cicero, the fellow traveller. People are a bunch of Ciceros. There, I said it. Come at me.
That was such a bad joke, but carry on.
His name comes from the word cicer, which is Latin for chickpea. Just one chickpea, just the one, not more than one. And that is like Zeno. Earlier on in this video, I mentioned Zeno, who was kind of the head honcho, the first Stoic. And he was being taught by Crates, the guy he met when he went into the bookshop. And Crates basically made Zeno carry a bunch of lentil soup through the streets, and Zeno, coming from this proud background, lentil soup was considered a food for the poor, and so this for Crates was a lesson to Zeno on humility. And a similar thing happens really with Cicero, because chickpea again was considered the food that the commoners eat, so having a name that was associated with that kind of low-income peasant food, I guess it taught him a lesson in humility. But the difference is that Zeno was born to a wealthy family, and he lost all of his wealth when all of his purple dye went into the bottom of the ocean. Whereas with Cicero, he never really lost that. He was kind of a rich man throughout his life. A rich philosopher. Oh yeah, I need to go and get a prop.
There's a prop?
Yeah.
You remember this now? I'll just stand here.
So Cicero wasn't really a true Stoic, but he did apply a lot of Stoic philosophy to achieve his political ambitions. He was also very big on, self-promotion, hypocrite. DaneCobain.com/meet. Thank you. He said, right, this shows you how rich this guy was. This is a direct quote. He said, "Actually, my account books show that I have received more than 20 million sesterces." I think that's how you say it, which is possibly up to about $120 million in today's money, but we don't really know because there's not really a way to convert that.
Correct him in the comments if you know.
And he received that in bequests. He said, "Nobody ever made me his heir unless he was a friend, so that any benefit there came along with a certain amount of grief." But he did also say, if you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. I have both of
That does
those.
sound really good.
I have both of those. So in 46 BC, Cicero published Stoic paradoxes in which he explained 6 of the primary Stoic paradoxes. So 1, that virtue is the only good. 2, that it is sufficient for happiness. 3, that all virtues and vices are equal. 4, that all fools are mad. 5, that only the sage is truly free. And 6, that the wise person alone is rich. Brutus and his mates didn't include Cicero in the plan to kill Caesar, and there's a reason for that. So, you know, Portia Cato knew about it, Brutus knew about it. Poor old Cicero, he had no idea, he was clueless. He was as shocked as anybody, he was, when he read it in the papers. He couldn't believe it.
In the scrolls.
Yeah. So this is what Shakespeare wrote about that. Do you want to be Cassius or Brutus?
I will be Brutus.
Okay, you're Brutus.
Here we go.
So I'm going to be Cassius. And he said, but what of Cicero? Should we sound him? I think he will stand very strong with us.
Oh, name him not. Let us not break with him, for he will never follow anything that other men begin.
What pussy hole. Yeah, fun death time. He ended up getting bumped off and he was beheaded, and his head, hands and tongue were all impaled both at the Forum and at Mark Antony's house as well, which I guess was so that when people came round he had a bit of a talking point.
Don't mess with me.
Yeah.
God, how did he earn that?
I don't know. I think just by being a bit of a dick, to be honest. Nobody really liked him because he was a toss-all. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. I don't really like him, but you know, Susie wanted me to talk about him because he's probably the most influential Stoic of all.
He's coming up.
Yeah. He's actually the last example in this book as well, for good reason, because he came along like 300 years after most of the main Stoics, which is why I'm not too interested in him, because he was, by this point, he was just following the movement. But everyone does like him because he was, as I say, a philosopher king. He was the first, and as far as I know, only Roman emperor who was also a Stoic. Maybe there might have been a few who were other branches of philosophy, but he was the only Stoic.
Yeah, he made a really good diary where a lot of the meditations were written down, and that is where a lot of the affirmations that people use, they come from the diaries of Marcus Aurelius. And also, he was in Gladiator. I've got to earn my Madam Media name somehow.
It does kind of come down a lot to what survives, so I think Marcus Aurelius is one of the ones whose writing survived the most, because there are a lot of the Stoics that are mentioned in this book where it's like we don't really know much about them. In fact, quite often all we know about the Stoic philosophers, it isn't their teachings, it's the way they lived their lives, which I think is kind of a recurring theme there, you know. You have to live your philosophy, you can't just think it. And I guess Marcus Aurelius is a good example of that because he didn't want to be king. He was actually adopted by Hadrian, as in Hadrian's Wall, that guy, and set up for the job from when he was very young. When he learned he was being adopted by Hadrian, he was sad rather than overjoyed, because like a rational person, he was a little bit bummed out about being taken away from his friends and family and wasn't really comforted by the thought of a load of riches. I think he would have rather just chilled with his mates, you know? But no, he was taken away and trained to be emperor. When he left, he was asked why he was sad, and in response he listed all of the evils that kings have done. So when he was actually made king, one of the first things that he did as well was he gave away half of his power. He kind of established less of a hierarchical structure. Now you have 2 at the top instead of 1. Slightly better, I guess. He also lived during a global pandemic. If you're watching this, congratulations, you're alive. You're probably living through a global pandemic or have lived through a global pandemic. He believed that a pandemic could only threaten our lives, and that what we needed to do was to protect our character. The important thing for us as well is how we act within this plague.
Control what you can.
Well, his dictum was, do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. So he quoted a lost Euripides play. This is another like fantastic thing, I guess. That a lot of our like knowledge of what the Stoics wrote comes from actually other people quoting them. And so we've lost the original manuscript or whatever, but we know that it exists because of that. He quoted Euripides saying, why should we feel anger at the world as if the world would notice? And that was put to the test because he lost 8 children. And he wrote about it. He said, it's fortunate that this has happened and I've remained unharmed by it, not shattered by the present or frightened of the future. It could have happened to anyone, but not everyone could have remained unharmed by it. People tend to forget that he also persecuted Christians and anyone he considered to be a barbarian.
We forget about that, you know.
He was a Roman, that's what they do, innit?
Yeah, they build roads and kill people. The point is, that it is not a strict set of rules set out by old men anymore. It's more like a way to apply a set of rules to your life just to try and, you know, not be a dick. It is now ideas about how to be. And there are a couple of examples. You now have Stoic Week. You can join this online course where you practice the philosophies for a week and try to be a Stoic. That's how I found out about it. And it's also working its way into films these days. Gladiator is the obvious one. He knows he's going to die the entire time. The Memento Mori is in there, and other examples from within sci-fi. For instance, there's a film called After Earth. Most people didn't quite give it the credit it deserved because it marketed itself as an action sci-fi. It had Will Smith in it and his son. But what is actually being taught there are the Stoic principles of how to not feel fear, how to not fear death, how to do what is right. So re-watch it with a philosophical viewpoint and you'll suddenly love the film. I'm going to make you watch that at some point. There are still books out there, but there are also voice recordings of the meditations. We listen to one quite often before we go to bed. It just teaches you these principles, and you find when you're in the middle of a global pandemic, you're just like, okay, I might die. But hey, have you seen this thing on YouTube?
What's for dinner?
You just get on with it as best as you can.
I would like a 120 BPM 4x4 click track, please. Off you go.
I can shake the thing.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
While I hide out in my bedroom, she wants to be the one who's keeping me alive. So I think nothing's wrong when I stay at home and play my song. So please help me. On some sublime philosophy, baby, see what I mean. I try too hard to break this life's monotony. Tambourine solo. Chorus! So please help me. Don't wanna waste my time on some sublime philosophy. Baby, see what I mean. I try too hard to break this life's monotony. But I can't close my eyes. She wants to hold my hand to keep her through the night. So I think nothing's wrong. I cried sometimes and told out all along. So please help me. Sublime philosophy, baby, see what I mean. I try too hard to break this life's monotony. Thank you, ancient Greece.
I love that. That was great.
That was fun.